Yeah, that's right. Today I'm gonna recreate the movie Titanic with all of its details from the 1997 masterpiece using the magic of Lego stop motion. However, taking a scene from the back then most expensive movie ever made and recreating it with Lego comes with a few challenges that we'll have to figure out. With the most apparent one being water. But not just any type of water, ocean-sized water. I don't have room for an ocean in here, so the general issue with water is that with stop motion, you gotta have full control over all the objects you're animating, because you need to precisely pose them for every frame you take. Whereas real water just kinda does whatever it wants. Which is why water in big budget stop motion films is pretty much always CGI. And since I have no idea of CGI, we have to find a different practical solution for our Lego stop motion ocean, which I want to test out by conducting a few animation experiments at a smaller scale first, for which I built this cute little model, Titanic Jr. Plan number 1 is the base plate ocean, which is actually not too uncommon in Lego stop motion. However, base plates are solid plastic, meaning that sinking stuff in there is kinda hard to do, but not impossible actually. You see, if we get hold of an object like this Lego pencil, I can totally animate it diving into water. But this only works because the pencil consists of many small bricks that I can gradually remove for each frame to make it look like it's diving into water, which doesn't work with the more complex structure of a Lego ship. And also, water is super reflective, whereas Lego is absolutely not. So nope, no baseplate ocean. Oh yeah, and I totally put this Lego pencil among the regular ones in my living room to troll my family. My second idea is to take this plastic tub and fill it with water to make an actual miniature ocean. But in order to have control over the sinking ship, I built this small stand with a hinge for Titanic Jr. to stand on. And by using some tape, I fixated it on the bottom of the tub to make everything stable. And after filling up the tub, the hinge allows me to gradually dip the ship's nose deeper and deeper into the water for each frame. This animating process is kinda the worst thing in the world actually. I mean, all I'm doing is slightly pushing the thing down one teeny tiny bit at a time. But hey, I guess this counts as a great meditation exercise or something, I don't know. And damn, this is looking fantastic. We only have to edit out the plastic edge of the tub later in post. But other than that, the ocean tub is approved. And now the time has come to equip Titanic Jr. with some fancy LEDs. I actually put shoe wrapping paper behind the portholes to make them all look evenly lit. However, if you pay close attention to all of the shots of the Titanic sailing across the sea, you'll notice the water spray trail things, or whatever you call them. That we'll also have to translate into stop motion. And similar to how I use cotton to create stop motion explosions, today we're gonna use this tissue paper that I tore into small pieces and made wet as our water spray. But like I mentioned, placing stuff on water doesn't allow us to animate it properly, so we'll have to find another way to make the sailing shots work. Which brings us to plan number 3, the glass surface. Glass has the perfect reflective properties that we need, and enables us to put our water spray tissues on top, making it ideal for animating the sailing shots. And yes, this looks absolutely perfect. However, there's still one more shot that we'll have to figure out, which is the entire ship sinking down completely, for which my ocean tub isn't nearly deep enough. Luckily, it didn't take me long to find a solution, which was to get hold of 3 pieces of glass, and to leave a small opening in the middle where we're gonna place Titanic Jr. And by covering up the edge with our water spray, this setup allows us to perfectly sink the ship. Allows us to perfectly sink the ship. So now that we've got all of that figured out, it's time to acquire an actual Lego Titanic. And Lego luckily released this wonderful set a couple years ago, which will make our lives super easy. Okay, neither am I filthy rich, nor am I capable of setting up an ocean large enough for a model of this scale. So I guess we're gonna have to build our own Lego Titanic then. Figuring out a place to start is always the hardest part when making a Lego model, especially for a huge and complex build like the frickin' Titanic. And this should be a great foundation for the whole thing, you know, with the back, middle part and front. But I later figured out that it'd be much easier to start building the middle of the ship instead, since it's the longest part. Oh, that's perfect. Which gives us a decent foundation to build everything above and below. However, there is one important detail that our Titanic needs to have that I haven't mentioned yet. The ship breaks in half at one point, which is a feature that we'll have to incorporate into our Lego model. This should work by having these 2 parts that are connected with pins, like this. But then we can remove them to have the ship break apart like that. So with that in mind, I continue to build the ship in 2 separate parts that can be seamlessly connected with Technic pins and taken apart when needed. The Titanic also has a whole lot of portholes, and using these Technic bricks allows me to super easily incorporate those without much struggle. And yes, building the ship's neatly curved bow also took forever to figure out. But with the help of some hinge plates, as well as these half-circle shaped bricks with a stud on the side that can be angled, I figured out a rough way on how to pull off this front. Okay, absolutely nothing that I'm building here feels even remotely legal, but somehow, this whole thing seems to be working out. And after scavenging all the red bricks I could find in my collection, I began building the hull and the keel, meaning the base of our Titanic is looking not too shabby anymore. Okay, but thing is that part of a ship is always submerged underwater, right? But with our glass ocean, there's nothing to submerge the ship in. So it's always gonna look way too high than it should be. Which is why I made these things detachable. So when we put it on the glass ocean, everything looks as it should. Also, don't ask me how I pulled off this front so smoothly. It's kinda a miracle that anything here works out the way it does. But as long as it works, it's fine, I guess. And afterwards, I began working on the ship propellers. I hate this. Let's make it vertical. And yep, building this vertically looked much better. Thus, the basis of our Titanic is complete. Time for a quick cleanup. So now the time has come to build the upper decks. But this is the point where I was facing the problem of needing these insane amount of windows. Because unlike for the black portholes below, I don't own a single white Technic brick. Fortunately, I came up with this window construction that uses the back of the washing machine piece, one transparent stud as well as a trans black 1x1 plate for the outside. So after completing the window rows, I moved on to building the rest of the upper deck, including the 4 funnels, for which I used a small hinge brick construction to make them ever so slightly angled towards the back. And therefore our rough Titanic model is finished. Guys, look at her. Now all that's left to do is to find every piece in the right color, light up this upper layer, and making the middle part look good. This meant going for a scavenging hunt through my entire LEGO collection to steal all the pieces I needed, such as sacrificing parts of my beloved assembly square so we can complete the ship. I also used a few tooth plate pieces for the broken apart middle, which slide in and out of each other in a super satisfying way. And as a final step, I added all of the remaining LEDs. And thus, after 1 week of building, our LEGO Titanic is finished. And also, please don't tell anyone, but I kinda only had enough parts to build one side of the ship properly. Which means that I'll just have to mirror the finished animation afterwards, whenever I want to film the ship from the other side. But let's not forget about the other 2 main characters of the story, which are of course Jack and Rose, with the latter also having her black coat for the later scenes. We also need to have a door for them, for you know. But we also need to build the main villain of the Titanic event, the iceberg. Scavenging any remotely sloped white piece I could come across, I stitched together this nightmare of any unsinkable ship. Oh, and in case some of you are still wondering why my videos take so long to make, that's partially because I have to do a lot of this stuff one-handed. And I'm very happy with how this iceberg turned out. Wait, one more thing? Ah, now it's perfect. Now that we've got everything built, it's time to turn this LEGO workshop into the LEGO film studio to animate the sinking of the Titanic. We've luckily already figured out all of the techniques in the beginning, so all that's left to do is to adapt them to the bigger scale of our new Titanic model. I started off with all of the sailing shots on our glass ocean, but the piece of glass I used for Titanic Junior is not quite big enough for Titanic Senior, which is why, just like in my last video, I had to get hold of my glass lunch table, which is a more than big enough surface. And after entering swimming mode, we're ready to animate this gorgeous looking scene. And when animating, I made sure to use spreads, like putting a paper tape measure on the path I want the ship to travel outside the view of the camera, so I can make sure that I move it the same amount for each frame for a perfectly smooth motion. And I once again used the same paper tissue water spray from earlier, making for some really awesome finished shots. So while these ship sailing shots were pretty straightforward, things get a little more fancy with these ship point of view shots. For stuff like this, I usually use my webcam, because it is small enough to be placed anywhere I need it. But since our Titanic is a large enough model, I could actually build a nice setup for my higher quality DSLR camera. Now we're ready to sail across the sea.
Buenos días, muchachos.
And yep, animating shots like these is always a wonderful change of pace, and I'm very pleased with the result. And right away, let me build this weird rig to flip the iceberg around, enabling us to film the underwater collision scene, which also looks pretty cool so far. Okay, but enough of the dull sailing shots. I wanna sink some ship. Now there are a lot of different sinking camera angles going on throughout the movie. So let's start with the simplest, the stern slowly rising without any visible water surface. This requires us to tilt the boat upwards. Problem is that this boat is heavy. However, there's one innocent looking LEGO piece that is the solution to all of our problems. And this piece is the amazing worm screw. All of you who have built some LEGO Technic before might already know the special ability of the worm screw, which is that you can turn a regular tooth gear by spinning the worm screw, whereas the worm screw cannot be turned by a regular tooth gear. So if we put a winch to such a worm screw mechanism and hook it up to our ship, we can tilt the boat upwards with incredible precision. Okay, but the most important part of this contraption is this little counterweight here, because without it... This setup allows me to raise the ship pretty darn high, but not quite high enough to be perfectly perpendicular to the water for when it starts to completely sink down. And to accomplish exactly that, I placed the winch on top of this wooden frame I own, while placing the hinge in the middle part of the ship, allowing us to animate all of the remaining stern rising shots, which turned out super cool as well. And also, a couple of years after the movie came out, it was calculated that there's absolutely no way that the stern rose up to a 45-degree angle like in the movie. Instead, the ship already broke in half closer to a 22 to 30-degree angle. Follow for more fun facts from the bathtub. It is so cold in here. And guess what? This winder setup right here turned out to be the holy grail for this Titanic project. We can elevate or lower absolutely anything we want. Even shots I was dreading super hard, like the ship breaking apart, turned out to be super convenient to animate as a result. Okay, cool, but now that we've got all of the shots in the dry covered, it's time to set up our real ocean again. And you might have noticed earlier that this plastic tub does indeed look like a plastic tub. So I taped the entirety of this thing black to make everything blend in with the background. Guys, do you see the unsinkable ship? It won't sink. Now I gotta find a counterweight. Oh my god. So I put some coins into a small bag, which I placed on the inside of the ship. And with the ship halfway submerged in water, I also removed the lower LEDs, because water plus electricity equals no good. And I also put a hole in here, so that now that the LEDs in here are gone, there is still light shining through when I put on the layer above. And yep, the coins were totally sufficient to keep the ship heavy enough. And with these exact strategies, animating every one of the remaining sinking shots was super straightforward, even though the slow and delicate sinking movements did take a lot of patience to get just right. But regardless, trusting the process and seeing the super smooth result makes it all worth it in the end. Oh, and in case you're wondering about this whole area here, don't you worry, we're gonna insert the rest of the missing ocean later in post-production. I think. That shouldn't be too hard, right? Right? But before the grand finale of the ship sinking to the ground, there's a couple more side quests to complete. Like the shots of Rose and Jack being all lovey-dovey on the ship deck, before realizing what's about to happen. This interior room shot, which will take place during the stern of the boat rising, making everything topple over. And guess what? It's not the film set that is tilted, but the camera, of course. And finally, a neat underwater shot of Jack and Rose after the ship has sunk, which turned out to be the most difficult shot to animate just right for this project. So it seems the time has finally come to take this thing and to sink it to the ground, and I think I already know exactly how we're going to accomplish this. We have already figured out the groundwork earlier with Titanic Jr., but now it's time to scale it up for the real deal. I started by adding a second winch to keep the ship stable in the air, because we don't have anything holding it stable on the ground now. However, now we're gonna have to place the 3 pieces of glass at this super high level to have enough room to sink the entire ship. So when I was a kid, my dad, who's a carpenter, gifted me these wooden building blocks, out of which I always built super epic forts and castles. And it is beyond awesome that even to this day, I still sometimes have use for them in my creative projects. This place looks so much more like a Zelda desert dungeon than a Titanic film set. But you can still see the wood underneath, so we're gonna need some stuff to cover that up. Now I shot this sequence in 3 steps that I'm gonna place on top of each other. The first one is the sinking ship itself, which was very straightforward. Whereas the other 2 are once again the tissue water spray and also a wave from the impact of the ship. And when overlaying them, they make one stellar shot together. Okay, but now we've arrived at the most painful part of this project. Both emotionally and animating wise. Jack and Rose freezing on the door. Okay, so this is gonna be the part where I'm gonna take these 2 and they're going to come out of the water and onto the door here, which means that I'll have to touch this disgustingly cold water all the time, which is why I'm wearing these to be more comfortable. And I've also put my stop motion controller in a plastic bag so I won't be damaging it with my wet hands. And yes, I cannot stress enough how uncomfortable and awkward it was to animate inside the cold water for hours. But yet, I guess this is where we say goodbye to Jack. Also no, Jack could have not fit on the door. We literally see the thing almost flipping over as they both try to get on there. And for the post-production, there were as always a whole bunch of rigs and this time also strings to mask out. However, the main challenge of the editing process for this one turned out to be the water surface. You see, this reflection here is absolutely perfect, straight up like a mirror. Ocean water, on the other hand, is moving around and shifting all the time, making the reflection distorted, because that's how water works. And the solution to pulling something like this off lies in one of the more advanced editing effects, the bump map. And bump maps are super awesome. A bump map is a black and white image, which can shift the direction of the pixels on the image you applied onto, with the amount being determined by how light or dark the pixels of the bump map are. Now, if we take a moving bump map that resembles a water texture, make sure it fits the perspective of our ocean, and apply it to the area where the reflection takes place, we've got ourselves actual freaking water. Oh my god. And while applying and adjusting this effect for all the different shots was a lot of work, I am beyond happy with the result. And finally, I did some tinkering around with water splashing visual effects. Okay, so I've been tinkering around with these bubbles for the past hour, and I would really like to explain to you what all of this does, but I'm afraid that would go beyond the scope of this video. Which finally means that our Titanic movie is complete. But one more thing, in my Legoverse, Jack is not an artist, but instead a Lego builder. Anyway, please have a look and let's see how the maiden voyage of our Lego Titanic is gonna go. Okay guys, but that's our Lego Titanic float. Okay, it actually does. Perfect. Thank you so much for watching, you absolute legend. And now go check out this video, where I also recreated the very first moon landing with Lego. So that's it for today, folks. See you soon, and as always, trust the process. Bye.